Hi, it's me, Camila Rose. It has taken me forever to sit down and do this video, but we're going to do it. We are going to make our video for Frankenstein, the movie. Now, I went and saw this film in the theater, which if you missed being able to see the theatrical release of the new Frankenstein film, you really missed out on a moment, because I know you've watched it on Netflix and it is as beautiful as it appeared to be. You should watch it on the biggest screen that you possibly can with the most high definition visuals, because it is gorgeous. So let's talk about the movie. Is the movie a direct adaptation of the book? No. What I did enjoy was that the movie did start out as the book did, on the ice in the north, heading towards trying to go on this extravagant adventure. Now, they cut out a lot about the captain and his desire for friendship, which I thought was a really important part of the book, was that he was seeking friendship. He was seeking a companion, because the captain's desire to have a companion paralleled with Victor Frankenstein's desire for a creation and to have someone who can understand him. So I feel like that was missing, and I do feel like it adds depth to the book as well as it would have added something to the movie. Did I enjoy the movie though? I love the movie. The movie was fabulous. So in being able to enjoy it for what it was, 1000%. We start off with that beautiful scene. They're up in the north, they're stuck in the ice, and we have this back and forth where they find, in this one, they find Victor Frankenstein after the explosion, because they're thinking, oh my goodness, like what is going on out here? Who else is possibly out here? Versus in the book where they see the creature and then they see Frankenstein coming along after him, and that's when they find him. But in this one, they have to leave their boat and go search for him, and they find him all mangled and messed up, and he's missing a leg, which is also a difference between the movie and the book. And so they bring him back on board, but then of course there's the creature, there's the monster, and he is trying to come and get Victor Frankenstein because he doesn't want them to take him away. And so they're fighting him, and they're like, this thing is not dying. What is going on? What is happening here? They bring Victor Frankenstein onto the ship. And so then that is when Victor Frankenstein starts to tell the story. So there's some slight variations that happen here. The other thing is that we're missing on the narrative with the captain telling his sister the story. And that's how we're hearing a story of a story of a story of a story, but we don't really get that happening in the film. But in the film, we also see that there is this stark difference between Victor's relationship with his father and his family versus in the book. In the book, Victor has a very loving, caring relationship with his father. His father is present, and his father is, in multiple times called in to comfort and to care for Victor, and he does so happily. Whereas in the film, Victor's father is pretty much absent for quite a bit of time. When he comes home, his wife, who he doesn't seem to have a lot of affection for, which we know he really truly loved her, and they kind of had this isolated relationship where it was just like the two of them doing all these things together and traveling so much. In the book, it's completely gone. But his father is coming home. He's this world-renowned surgeon, and he comes to the house, and his wife is pregnant, and he's just not very affectionate or friendly towards them. And he's very cold, very harsh, particularly towards Victor. And he's teaching him how to be a surgeon, how to be a doctor. And he is punishing Victor. They get to the point where they say he doesn't punish him. He's not going to hit his hands anymore, because he would slap his hands with a rod. Now he's going to, he hits him in the face, and he talks about pride and vanity. But Victor's mother is pregnant. And as we know in the book, they were trying to have a lot of children and couldn't. And in the film, she is pregnant and she dies during childbirth. And so his mother, though, is clothed in a lot of red. That's her color. That's her signature. Victor is always drinking milk. That's another difference. And it's very strange, but it is, to me, a symbol of his connection to nurturing, to seeking nurture, in missing having a caring family and nurturing home environment. And so he's drinking the milk associated with the mother. His mother was his caretaker and the one who actually showed him affection. And then like the absence of that. And so the milk just serving as this like replacement that we see throughout the film of him having that desire to be able to be cared for and to be loved. And then seeing that transform into a desire to create life, but a life that is made without the assistance of another, particularly the assistance of a woman. So his mother is dead now, but the child lives. And so the child lives and is his brother, William. So Victor's always wearing red or black. William's always wearing blue or something that's a lighter tone. And so we get that contrast of the opposites between the red and the blue. And his father loves William. His father makes disparaging comments about Victor and his mother being so dark. They have dark hair, dark eyes. So they're just, he frames them in that way. And his brother William is blonde. I think he has blue eyes, but lighter toned eyes. He is preferring this other brother. And so we kind of get this contrast between the light and the dark, but his brother doesn't seem to have any animosity per se towards Victor. Now, Victor's father doesn't last very long, so that's another difference. Victor's father is gone soon after, but Victor starts to kind of build up his own ego, his own personality. He starts to build in his confidence, and he starts telling his father things before he dies about how he's going to surpass him. He will be better than him. He will be able to do what his father couldn't, because he suspects that his father let his mother die because he didn't like her. And he suspects that he is not as good of a doctor as he could be because he is not able to stop death or to overcome death. And so Victor takes that upon himself that is what he will do. His father dies. They send one brother off to the family. They send Victor off to school. And that's when Victor starts to go through his teaching and his learning. The next thing we get, Victor's on a disciplinary tribunal. Victor is in trouble. And Victor is in trouble because his professors at the school are not happy with him experimenting with life and death. They think it is a sin. They think he is pushing the envelope. And they are like, this is not acceptable. This is not going to work. And so Victor's like, you all are scared. You're all afraid. You're not willing to do what you need to do in order to be able to be true, like extraordinary scientists, to really push the envelope, to push us forward as man and as creators. And so he brings in this only from the waist up, and the physical, practical effects are just amazing. That's why I'm like, you have to watch. And so we have this torso of a man. He's not all fully there. He's got all these things like wired up in him, and he basically like plugs him in like a car battery with the lights and things, and he charges him up. And so then the torso starts to talk. It starts to be animated. And, in the book, that was a huge part of like animation, bringing life, creating life. And so he goes back and forth. He plays with the ball. He throws the ball at the torso. The torso catches it, and they're like, abomination, take it down. This is not going to be okay. And so then he's like, pulls out one of the plugs and it dies in this very dramatic sense. And so we see this man, though, who walks in, and he has these very fancy shoes. You can hear them click-clacking across the floor. You see the gold rim on them. So you recognize that this man is a man of wealth. He has some money. He sits down and he's listening to what Victor is saying. And he goes and he talks to Victor afterwards, and he tells him, and we learn that this man is Henry. So as we know in the book, Victor... Now, we haven't met any Elizabeth here. In the book, the version that I read, Victor, while traveling, meets his family, adopts Elizabeth. His mother cares for Elizabeth while she has scarlet fever. His mother succumbs to the scarlet fever. Elizabeth lives. We all know that they're kind of destined, and the family was expecting them to be partnered. He has a best friend, and we don't necessarily see that happening in the movie. In the film, we have Henry, who is this man who is interested in being able to provide the funds and the resources for Victor to animate bodies, to create life, to overcome death. And so he is telling Victor he understood that the reason why he actually had to end his performance during his tribunal was because he was only able to keep this figure alive for a short amount of time. And he had to make sure that he pulled the plug before everyone saw that he wasn't actually able to reanimate this body. And so Victor's all upset. Now, there is this very interesting scene because when they're sitting on the couch, when Henry first comes, invites Victor to come and visit him, and Henry is in this extravagant home. He's painting this woman who's nude, and it's this very sensual, seductive scene. And then when Henry and Victor sit on the couch, they're very close to each other, which I thought was a very interesting way to play this, because even in the book, there are these moments where I'm like, what's happening here? What's going on here? I'm seeing a little something that could be more than just friendship. And as in the book, we see the captain say that, you could almost say that his desire for a friendship and a companion could be in a romantic sense, not in necessarily a lover's sense, but in the fashion of the desire for that companionship that goes beyond just someone that knows you and has affectionate feelings for you, but that truly understands you and is a part of you, is a reflection of you. And through which you can create and grow in life. And so I was like, what an interesting little moment here. Maybe we have a little something going on. I enjoyed that. Now we see that this man is like, I will give you everything that you need. And he leads him to a tower. Now I was like, how delightful. And Victor's brother happens to actually be engaged to Elizabeth, who is the niece of Henry. And so now we're starting to get a, kind of complicated web. He sends him to this tower. And I love that the imagery is of a tower because, as you know, I do astrology. And in astrology and tarot, the tower represents this moment of illumination, of awakening, of your world falling apart around you, maybe unexpectedly. But there is a reason why this thing is falling apart, is because you have to change your perspective. The individuals who are in the tower gets struck by lightning, which is, symbolism that is relevant to the film. The tower is struck by lightning. The individuals will then fall onto their heads and their crowns are knocked off. The ego is debilitated. It is decreased. And so this moment of vulnerability, when the ego has been pushed to the side, opens you up to growth, to rebirth, to being able to understand the next card in the tarot deck, which is the devil, the attachments that you have, the space where your ego is holding you into these places and in these situations because you are unable to let go. And so I thought the tower was very symbolic. The tower also can be, of course, a phallic symbol. It can be a symbol of, but the tower is also related to the feminine, because when you look at things like the idea of the divine feminine or something of that nature, you're seeing things like Mary Magdalene and everyone, I don't really get into that. But Magdala actually means the tower. In many of the mythology or the fairy tales that we see where we talk about inner work and we talk about transformation, we talk about going within and being able to identify those parts of ourselves or those aspects of ourselves that have been suppressed or sublimated, we see that there is a relationship often between a tower and a woman and a tower. Rapunzel, we have Psyche and Eros, her last task, she has to go down into the underworld. And when she decides to do that, she only knows one way to get there. So she goes and climbs a tower and is going to throw herself from the tower in order to enter into death. And the tower actually speaks to her. The tower gives her direction and gives her insight. He gives her the directions about how to actually get into the underworld and be able to return from it. So the tower can often represent this space of illumination, of knowledge, of information transference. And so I thought it was fantastic that he brought him to this ominous, huge tower to do this work, this like hidden secrecy of delving into the path between life and death. And so it's a space of power and a space of prophecy. So how to gain access to death lies in the wisdom of the tower. And we see this happening in this film. We also see this happening in the many fairy tales, as I already mentioned, and mythology. Elizabeth shows up. We meet Elizabeth. Elizabeth is not his sister. As I said, she is the niece of Henry, the person who is giving him the funds and the resources to do this. And Victor is enthralled by her. He is not necessarily super interested in her to begin with, but he finds her presence to be interesting. We do not see many women here at all. We saw the woman who was nude and being drawn and painted by Henry, but we haven't seen many other women other than his mother since she passed. So here's the introduction of another feminine individual in the film. And so Elizabeth comes in, and Victor's spending most of his time talking to his brother, and his brother's like, "Are you okay?" And obviously the answer to that is no. Victor is a little unhinged and has never gotten over those power issues that he has experienced between his mother and his father when he was younger. And so Victor's telling him kind of about what he's doing and that he'll be gone and all these other things. And as they're sitting at the table during dinner, he is discussing about the war. They're having these conversations, and Elizabeth she has a critique of the war and of the men who are in power, who are encouraging the battles and the fighting to happen. And Henry is like, "Oh my goodness, I've heard this so many times. I don't even let's go, let's retire and let's go have us some whiskey and, cigars in the parlor." And so William and Henry leave, but Victor stays. He says he wants to hear what she has to say. And so Elizabeth critiques the thoughts. It says that calls them fools, that these are individuals who are sending these men off to their deaths, but they are not actually the ones who are ever in danger. They are in their towers, they are in their homes, they are in their safe spaces, doing and fighting for these causes that they are completely disconnected from and are not actually interested in assisting or helping anyone. And so they have this interaction, and it kind of piques Victor's interest. And so he is starting to, do some of his work. He's getting into all the nitty gritty with things. He's going back and forth about whether he's going to actually commit to all of this. And Elizabeth is around. She's living her life. We see her. She's wandering through one of the markets, and then he runs into her. Now, this I think is interesting because it makes me think of Dracula and those adaptations of Dracula, where we see that moment where Dracula is in the street and he sees Mina in the street, and then they have that first interaction, that first engagement. We see Victor seeing Elizabeth here in the streets and interacting with individuals. And then he follows her into the church, and she goes in for confession, and he sneaks in as if he is the priest and tries to pretend like he is the priest. Now, at this time, he is interested in knowing what her opinion is of him. And so he's getting her to go through confession, and she's kind of playing along with it. And then she says, I dislike him greatly. I don't like Victor. She's basically like, I think he's pompous. I think he's a fool. And he has too much ego because he cannot understand that someone would obviously be able to tell that he is following them and has followed them into this confessional. And so now he's been caught, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I see that you understand." And she's like, so they go out and they get them some food, and they're spending some time together. Now, Elizabeth, I think it's very interesting because Elizabeth was in a convent for quite some time. So she wears this cross necklace. And then when she's in this scene, she's wearing blue, and there's some green and some yellow thrown throughout it. And we see the color, and the colors that she wears, the colors that everyone else wears, I believe plays a very prominent role in displaying the emotions, the message that is happening in that moment. So with her in blue, we see that she is aligned more with the energy of his brother in this calm, nurturing, this cared for and loved for, this kind of elevated space. And then we see with that green and that yellow, there's some shifts happening. There's some things that are starting to change. She may not be fully in alignment in this energy over here. Though she wears a red cross necklace, and we know that red is associated with Victor, is associated with his mother. And so there is that connection that we're starting to see show up here. She feels that Victor is manipulative. They're having this meal together. They're chit-chatting and talking to each other. They dance together. Victor is now fully interested in Elizabeth. So he decides, let's get rid of this brother. He sends his brother off to focus on the construction of the tower and what is needed. He needs these large metal tubes so that he can connect with the storm and then have those metal pieces channel the electricity down so that it gives him the power to reanimate the bodies. We see him sending William off in order to work on that and leaves him with the silversmith and is often trying to distract him. And so we also then see that he traps this butterfly. And I thought that was also interesting because I was like, oh, this seems to relate to a trapping of this idea and desire for control over things that are free, control over things that are beautiful, control over life. And so I was saying, I'm sure we'll see this parallel in him trapping Elizabeth, or a desire to do so. He sends William off, as I said, to do the construction of the lab. We have Liz in red and green, and the choice of the seat of the soul. She has chosen belief does not make it true. And there's this beautiful symmetry, this beautiful relationship that we start to see about Elizabeth sharing about the intensity of what she feels life is about, that she thinks that it is more than just this, we are these beings in these bodies, and that you can't just, pump them full of enough electricity and then they are animated and they are alive. Again, in the red and the green, we see this shift happening. She's no longer fully in blue. She's no longer fully aligned with or connected to William the brother. She's starting to shift over into a space that's being more open to Victor and open to the work that he's doing. And green. So red and green I also thought was interesting because both of these can be considered colors associated with the idea of life. Red with the blood that runs through us, with this intensity, with fire, with the passion, with the creation, the fire, modern day Prometheus. It's the fire literally that gives us life, right? And that's the red. But green is also associated with life. It is the verdancy of fertility and of fecundity of the land and of just, the green and the trees and all these, the harvest and all of that, the green man, the green woman, Mother Earth, all these things. And then we also see that green can be associated. And if you've ever watched the movie Men or you've seen The Green Knight, green is associated with decay as well. And so there's that parallel again between this life and death, this polarity, this duality that exists within these colors. But green and red are also, they're contrasting colors. They are in opposition to each other. And so even though they often can relate to similar symbols and meanings, they have this push against each other. So green as decay, as things that are going bad, that have been left out and they no longer actually have life, but maybe that life has transformed. Now it's something that is feeding bacteria or something that could be harmful to us. And so we see these starting to kind of come back and forth and come together and build this interesting narrative visually of what is being displayed within this story. Because while Victor seems to be so preoccupied with this idea of animation, of overcoming death, at the same time, it's taking over his life. He's not living. His own life is decaying. And we also see that this is decaying his relationships, his own well-being. And we see that this is something that's not really leading to him being able to live. And it's a symbol of his disconnect between himself and with others. I love that line though. She has chosen his brother. She is not interested in being with Victor. And she has to tell him that because he questions whether she wants to actually be with him, whether she is actually free, because we have this butterfly who becomes caged. And although you can believe something, it does not mean it is true. And she's critiquing Victor on his whole ideology around reanimation and being able to overcome death and do all of these things, and that he is then a creator and progenitor of life. She's like, you can believe all of these things, but it doesn't actually mean that that's what you're doing. It doesn't mean that it's true. Now, mind you, this man, so Henry, his money comes from artillery and from the war. And so in order for him to be able to maintain his wealth, to be able to pay Victor, to be able to create this new life, the war has to continue, and he has to be able to make his money from these battles that are happening. And he's telling Victor that, because Victor's like, well, where am I going to get the body parts from? Where am I going to get them in? We want it to be of a certain type. We want them to be, large enough so that it's easier to be able to connect all the nitty gritty little pieces. And he's like, well, we're going to have to pull them from the battlefield, because no one will be looking for them. We can just say that, they were missing. We couldn't find them, or, they're in so many pieces that, we can just send home some of it. So you have that ability to not have to go and try to steal bodies from the graveyard or anything like that. You have this just kind of plethora of choice to be able to pick from these body parts available. Now, Victor doesn't really like this because they've been blown apart because they're in a battle. And so they're not really good specimens. And so he has to be really particular. So within the tower, in the basement, there's this aquaphor system. And in there, he has all these body parts that he's just kind of sawing and picking pieces from and all this other stuff. And then he brings them upstairs and he's sawing and picking pieces from them and putting the body together. And as he's testing out, like, which one's working, which one isn't, the room is just covered in red, covered in blood from these body parts. And you see, like, the intensity begin to grow as his obsession, as his preoccupation with being able to accomplish this also begins to grow. So as he's trying to make this happen, he's like saying that he's looking at the different systems. He's like, the chi in the Eastern system, how do we get this energy to flow? And then he's like, there's, what we understand is like the blood and the tissues and the bones and the circular chi. And then we have, the energetic side of things with the chi. And then he says we have to look at the lymphatic system. And I thought that was interesting because of so much of an emphasis on the lymphatic system now and how it runs through the body. And it's really the second part of the nervous system that manages our emotions, our ability to respond to the world around us, how our body functions, and it delivers information. It cleanses and clears out, and other things that are building up within the body is a system that moves and transports and communicates for us throughout our body. And so he is interested in being able to then perhaps be able to use the lymphatic system to be able to reanimate this body. There is a huge Medusa in the background of his laboratory. And I also thought that was an interesting imagery to have here, because with the Medusa, that story, depending on which perspective, the more modern version is one that's more geared towards empowerment. One of the other versions that was by Ovid, where we have Medusa being with her sisters and being brought over as perhaps a transference of their travels as the Greeks and the Romans began to build their mythological systems, of her being related to African mythology and their belief systems, Indian mythology and their belief systems. But, Medusa either being a handmaiden or priestess or related to Athena, and then eventually being either seduced or assaulted by Poseidon, happening in Athena's temple, and then Athena either punishing or giving Medusa a way to protect herself by making it so that if you were to see her, she would turn you into stone, and she has the hair that is made out of snakes, and she is a Gorgon, that is how she is. She is a creature who has these monster-like features to begin with. It's just that she would not have turned those who looked upon her into stone. In inner work, we look at the story of Medusa as the overpowering mother. We look at it as the mother who is coming in, and this idea of power that freezes us in our tracks. And if you look at the lymphatic system and we think about, how our energy moves throughout us and how we are able to maintain our well-being through keeping our lymphatic system flowing. But as it's connected to our nervous system, when we are activated through some type of threat to our survival, we then move into those responses that are either going to be flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And part of the freeze is related to this idea of like a Medusa response. You freeze in your tracks. You're so frightened. You don't know what to do. And perhaps because of that, you might move into faint. So you may try to play dead. The vasoconstriction will happen where the blood flow and your blood pressure drops to a low point where you pass out. So then you are really not a threat any longer to whatever is concerning you. And so you perhaps may be able to survive. And so Medusa can represent that need for survival that comes from a response that goes into freeze and faint as opposed to fighting. Now, in this case, who is Medusa? Is it Victor? Is it Henry? Is it Elizabeth? Is it none of them? Is it the lurking energy of his mother who is no longer around? Is it his father who he had that terrible relationship with in this film? I think that it's left up to interpretation, in my opinion, but I thought it was an interesting symbol to have there. There's a lot of gore as he builds the person, and then we have the storm coming. And so he's like, oh, it's the opportune time. Now is the time. The storm is coming. The storm is building. I do a lot of work with Oya, and as I was reading through the work of Oya and how storms happen in our world with the buildup of the pressure, the rise and the fall of the temperatures of the air, the density of the air, the water that's in there, and fronts that happen because of the different ways that the air travels around the world and across the land and the water, and how the low pressure and the high pressure come together to build these storms. And so the storms can often be a representation of a build up of these dualities within ourselves. So remember, we have the red and the green, we have the tower that's here, we have these ideas about life and death and about decay and about struggle and about sovereignty and about power. And so they're building up, and this climax of the movie it's coming forth to us, this kind of building up, and we're hitting one climax and then we hit, several other ones. And so this storm is brewing, it's getting stronger. And part of this storm that is brewing is that he is feeling this pressure from Henry to have to reanimate this. He has to get this done by a certain amount of time because the war is starting to wane. So Henry will not have as much income coming in. There won't be as many bodies available. He has to make this happen. But there's another area that is adding to the stress of this and of the pressure here, because we find out that Henry has syphilis. And because Henry has syphilis, he is pushing for Victor to be able to find a way for him to overcome death, because he doesn't want to die from this disease. And so he's worried that he will become this madman who would just be rambling without any means and with no one to stop him, no one to save him. And so he's pushing Victor to do this. And Victor's like, he doesn't want to do that. Victor is not interested in keeping individuals from not being able to die. Victor is interested in being able to overcome death in the order to create life, but under his terms, within his design. And so Victor is now starting to move towards this more godlike stance, which there is this system of awareness that we can sometimes think of. And this system of awareness has specific phases. And one of them is this godlike entity. The first phase, you start off with, I am related to, or I am connected to these mythological, very large scale godlike entities. Victor himself is related to the best surgeon in their world. And so he has this kind of mythos related to him. And so as his son and as someone who has, he believes, surpassed him, he is now even more powerful. And so he's been othered, though, because he's not like these other individuals. He hasn't been accepted by him. He goes through this alienation phase where he is separated. They are judging him at this tribunal. They don't understand. They don't believe in what he wants to do. They think he's wrong. He is now have to kind of be separated and do his own thing. And then we get to this persecution phase where he feels like he's been so judged. He's like, I'll never be a part of them. I'll never be like them. I will just have to do my own thing. But we also get to this kind of annihilation phase where it's then I will have to destroy the part of myself and thus destroy that they dislike so that I can be a part of them, but also so that I can like myself. But then we get to this next phase where we then say, I am unable to destroy this part of myself. And because I'm unable to do so, I must then overcome. I must overcome all of this. I am no longer going to just be related to this godlike figure. I must become this godlike figure. And that is the process we watch Victor go through in this film. And as he is being confronted by Henry to finish this project so that he is able to, Henry wants him to basically transfer his consciousness, take his brain and put it into this body and reanimate it so that he can survive and live. And Henry's like, I'm not trying to do all that. I'm just trying to bring this body to life. I'm trying trying to prove that I was right and feed this ego that's built up within him. He wants to take over this new Adam. That's what Henry wants to do. He wants this perfect body. And Victor's like I said, no, thank you. He climbs up this tower because he's like, I got to get all this stuff done. So he's in the rain, in the storm. It's insane. And he's climbing this tower and he's hooking everything up. And then he climbs back down. And Henry says that he will be the eagle that feasts on the liver. So we're going into Prometheus, who is then punished for bringing the fire to man by being tied upon the rock. And then he has to have every day an eagle comes in, which the eagle is a representation of Zeus. And he comes in and he eats the liver and will regrow his liver. And it happens every single day. Eventually, falls to his death, and he is cracked open. And in doing so, again, we go back to that tower reference from the tarot cards, where you fall, where you are awakened, where you are enlightened. In this case, though, it leads to his ending. And there's one of the metal rods gets bent. And so Victor's like, no, everything has to work. It needs to get in alignment. I can't lose this. It doesn't seem like it's going to work. And then he's covered in red, and the red, the blood of life, the red gloves he puts on to protect his hands. He is taking life into his own hands. He's taking the power into his own hands, because the energy of being able to create this life and to channel it is so much more than what he is. If he were to touch it directly, he would not survive. He is able to make it happen. The lightning comes down, the rods are illuminated, the body is animated, and it becomes alive. And immediately, one difference that I saw was that Victor did not immediately reject the creature. He is like, I am your creator. I am the one who made you, and all these other things. He's excited to see what he's done and to see what he can make happen here. But he tends to start to lean towards being very much so like his father and being abusive like his father. And Elizabeth and William, they come to visit because they're like, what's going on? Where are you? Elizabeth is very concerned because she hasn't heard from her uncle. And this time she shows up, she's wearing green and a red dress with a purple hat. And so purple, as we know, can symbolize royalty. It can symbolize religion. It can symbolize this idea of divinity with a bow and a blue veil. So she has a mix of colors going on here. She is appealing to many different aspects of symbols and themes within the film. And she goes down because Victor is raving on with William about what he's done, and he looks unhinged, and William is very concerned for him in his blue. And she goes down and she finds the creature chained up because Victor keeps him locked up in the aquifer underneath the tower because the tower is all a mess. And she finds the creature and she's like, what has happened to you? Who has done this to you? She's so concerned for his well-being. And the creature Victor's been trying to teach the creature to speak, to say more than just Victor, because he doesn't believe that the creature is intelligent, but he's also not really being patient or trying to teach or connect with the creature. And so Elizabeth's down there speaking to him and getting to know him and things like that. Now, he's not responding to her, but he is responding to her in looking at her and paying attention to her. And so we see this connection start to grow here. She's very gentle and he's very gentle with her. And so she returns that night to see him. And after confronting Victor and saying, what have you done? And he's like, I created this thing is mine. And he's, raving off. And so Elizabeth goes back down and she comes down in a see-through purple gown, and she has a green robe lined in red. And she tells Victor that he has made a mistake. You are the great Frankenstein who has made a mistake. Only monsters play God. And so we see this mirror of Victor starting to show itself through Medusa, through the tower. And Victor is angry because he's been trying to teach the creature to say another word. And Elizabeth is telling him, that I'm Elizabeth. And the creature learns Elizabeth. And that's the only second word he knows. And when he says this to Victor, who is at this point now where he's like, I'm just going to get rid of you. If you do not speak, I'm going to destroy this whole experiment because it was a failure. When he hears him say Elizabeth, he's like, how dare you say this name? This is the second name that you know. He gets this inner conflict because he sees himself as this creator, even though he has been completely disconnected from the process because it's more been of an act of ego and obsession as opposed to a desire to actually create and bring life. He's trying to overcome death, not create life. He's very angry. He decides that he's going to be done with this. He was like, you will not honor me. He traps the creature down below so that he will not be able to escape. He fills the tower with gasoline. He sends off Elizabeth and William. They're gone. He tells them to get out of here. And he sets the place on fire. And so now we have, again, this red flame hot. And mind you, I've forgotten to mention this. There's been a statue where Victor would pray in his room and he would have these visions. And so again, a vision in Yoruba culture to perform in the masquerades. The terminology is iron, and it can be related to a vision. The vision as in the imagination that has been brought forth from the inner eye into the real world. And so as he's been doing these prayers to the statue, he would have these visions of the statue turning into an angel. And the angel gave him the understanding of how to create this life. And it would make him into this powerful being. But the vision and the angel shifts into a devil and fire and all these things, destruction. And so he is like, I have to destroy all of this. I will burn it all up. I will start anew. And so he sets the place on fire. And as he does, he runs from the tower. Now the creature is trying to leave. There's fire in the eyes of the creature. They're Prometheus. And so he runs away and he feels bad eventually and tries to come back and save the creature, but he cannot do so. He ends up having a stone fall on him. He loses his leg. He cannot run in and save the creature. The creature thinks he has been abandoned. Elizabeth and William are coming back because Elizabeth has this terrible feeling. And she's like, we must turn around. He's going to try to kill him. They get back in time to see the tower fall. And they believe that the creature has died. And we see now that the creature escapes through the aquifers out into the water. And so this is one of his first times dying. And that is the end of this first part. So I'll come back later in my next video and we'll talk about the second end, and we'll talk about all of the green man symbolism and this shift from the red to the green. See y'all in a little bit. Bye.